Hello guys, welcome to Suunto ZoneSense webinar. We are here in rainy Finland in Suunto office and we have some exciting content for you guys to listen today. My name is Janne Kallio. I'm head of digital ecosystem here in Suunto, also leading our training and physiology features. What should we do in the future? Today's webinar, we will have 1 hour time to discuss a bit about what does a training intensity mean and how the ZoneSense plays in this. Then we have greetings from our ambassador athletes. We discuss with Monicardi on what was the research foundation on the ZoneSense. We have Esa Räsänen joining us. And then at the end, we have also time for the questions and answers. So feel free to ask questions during the session on the discussion board, and we will highlight the most interesting ones for you guys. So again, let's start today talking about first about training intensity. What does training intensity mean, and how ZoneSense will help you guys in your training. So when we think about the training intensity in endurance sports, it basically means looking at the metabolic state of the human body during the exercise session. So basically, when you are breathing air through your lungs to your bloodstream, heart is pumping that blood to your muscles, and energy is transferred into movement. This is the intensity thinking we are trying to understand what happens in the human body. And several decades, the athletes, coaches, the whole endurance industry has been looking at these training intensity in the following manner. So first of all, when you do a, let's say, easy running in the morning, easy jog, you are doing this aerobically. So you have enough oxygen in your system to change the energy into movement. So you can do a 5-hour hike or 30-minute easy run, 1 hour easy ride, completely aerobically. Once the intensity starts to increase a bit, you start to get a bit more power, a bit more pace. You cross over so-called aerobic threshold. And an aerobic threshold here means that the oxygen is not anymore enough to in your energy system, so you start to work anaerobically, meaning that start to be lactate in your bloodstream. And of course, depends a bit on which intensity you are in this anaerobic range. For example, you might run a half marathon, 1.5 hours, completely anaerobically. And then if you still increase the intensity, at some level you go over so-called anaerobic threshold, and you go into what we want to call VO2 max range. You go to red. And usually when you, for example, if you run a 5K run in a track, it takes 15 to 20 minutes, 25 minutes. This all-out effort, and you are doing this over anaerobic threshold. In principle, in physiology, we have defined quite long time the intensity on these 3 different ranges. There, of course, wearables have used a different zone setups like 5 zones, 7 zones. But in principle, in physiology, these are the 3 areas. These are the 2 thresholds that mainly athletes and coaches are trying to understand how I'm actually working today. Is it aerobic, anaerobic, or over anaerobic threshold? Now, the challenge, of course, here is that when we are in Suunto, for example, trying to help you guys to do as precise and good training as possible, it's pretty challenging for us to really provide you the right information about training intensity. And it starts from the point that usually when you take a Suunto watch into use, or you perhaps use some other products or some other apps, we, for example, ask your age, and based on age, we define your maximum heart rate, and based on maximum heart rate, we define a different zones, like zone 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And this is an example of the screen, what you see here, that there is a age on x-axis, y-axis is the estimated heart rate, and you have a black line that how the age in big population correlates to the maximum heart rate. The challenging part here is that you are not a big population, you are individual athlete. So you will be one of those red or blue dots, which represents individual athletes' maximum heart rate. So you can see that if you're a 50-year-old guy, your maximum heart rate might be 150 or it might be 220, depending who you are. So using a population averages to understand these kind of levels is pretty much impossible. It gives a guideline, but it's not enough to really understand the intensity that you would follow in your aerobic run or threshold session. Then the other challenge is that while you are running, let's say heart rate 140, it might be completely aerobic effort for you, but then when you jump onto a bike and you ride with the same heart rate, that's anaerobic. So different sports, depending on what muscles groups you are using, how the sport is behaving, have a different intensity levels. If you are doing open water swimming, you might be completely clueless what are the intensity levels in that sport. So if you are going to swim a 1 hour aerobically, you do too hard the first 15 minutes. Now, what athletes have done for a long time is that they go to then the exercise laboratory, they test themselves in a treadmill ramp-up test, or they do an indoor cycling test, or perhaps a rowing test. And that's of course great way to understand a bit of where your intensity levels are, so you can use them in training. But of course, this is also quite expensive and only available in certain sports. So if you want to do some new sports, cross-country skiing, classic or skate style, it's a different chance. So how do you actually define that in physiology test? It's very difficult, and at least it's expensive. Now, the challenging part here is as well that these intensity levels actually change throughout the day, or even within the day, or even throughout the week. As an example, myself, I have been tested in same laboratory week apart in treadmill test, and my aerobic pace changed 30 seconds per kilometer. Same guy, same test, same laboratory, different person, different day. Now, of course, many of you guys know that when you do a run in a hot conditions, your heart rate is in a completely different level than in cold conditions. If you go in high altitude, there's less oxygen, the intensity changes again. So these all create the challenges to really understand how you are measuring the intensity in today when you go and do your workout. And we believe that we have a solution for this. So let's look at a bit of clip. What is ZoneSense? So ZoneSense. ZoneSense, we would like to claim that this is the first real intensity measurement in wearables. When we think about intensity measurement, we have been now discussing about measuring heart rate. Now, we would like to claim that ZoneSense actually measures the heart. And to be more precise, we actually measure the stress of the heart during exercise with heart rate variability. You might be familiar with heart rate variability in recovery measurements. So basically, for example, Suunto watches, we measure a nighttime heart rate variability using so-called root mean square of successful differences, where we analyze your heart rate variability during the previous nights and how it has been changed over a longer period of time to understand what is your current recovery state. But measuring heart rate variability during exercise is something pretty new. And what is the great thing here is that we have partnered with Monicardi, which is a university team spin-off company, who identified that actually using dynamically deteriorated fluctuation analysis index, you are able to evaluate what is the current intensity of the exercise. And when I mean intensity, I mean aerobic, anaerobic VO2 max. Not a number, but actual intensity, what athlete wants to know. In order to you guys to understand what does this mean, let me show you one picture. This is a DDFA analysis from ramp-up test in laboratory. So you can see on the black line is a heart rate. X-axis means time, so the intensity increases throughout the laboratory test. And then you see a color-coded map behind it there, which means each beat-to-beat value color-coded based on how it correlates to other heart rate variability time spans. So what it means is that when your heart rate is beating, we look at how much variability there is at this time slot, and then we look at how does it correlate from previous time slots. So basically, when the intensity is very easy, there's a lot of correlation between heart rate variability. It basically means that your heart rate variability, the changes throughout the heart rate piece, are very, very similar across the history of that in that training session. And then when the intensity is very, very hard, there's not that much correlation. There is anti-correlate behavior. So the heart rate variability is very, very different in harder intensities. And when we look at the intensity levels with this DDFA, we can see that, okay, you go hard, anti-correlated, you go easy, it's correlated. And there's a mixed behavior between. So identifying this, we don't even need to know what is your level. We just look at, is there correlation? So when, of course, we have been now working throughout the last 12 months hard with Monicardi to how to put this in wearables. So what we created was a DDFA index. This is one value that you can follow during the training session or after analysis. And when we look at the same data that I just showed in laboratory test, first I illustrate there's a power increased during the cycling test. There's the heart rate increasing in the same test. You can see it nicely grows. And then there's lactate values that are being measured by the laboratory itself. So how the lactate increases from the bloodstream. So then when the laboratory tries to evaluate where is my aerobic threshold, where's my anaerobic threshold, they find out that, okay, at the 130 beats per minute and at the power 175, that's my aerobic threshold. And then at 225 power, that's, by the way, not my data. I have bigger power. That's the anaerobic threshold is the 149 beats per minute. Now, when we then draw the DDFA graph between or behind there, we can actually see that DDFA value changes. It crosses the aerobic threshold at the same time where the lab was actually identifying the aerobic threshold, and it crosses over to the red, from yellow to red on anaerobic threshold at the same time. So it seems to be that we are able to identify those threshold levels through the DDFA index. Okay, what does it mean in Suunto products? So now, late September, we published ZoneSense, the Suunto watches, Suunto mobile application. And now when you do a workout, you might be running, cycling, swimming, open water swimming, mountain biking, gravel cycling, rowing, speed skating, whatever is the cardio sport, you can now see your aerobic, anaerobic, and VO2 max levels live on the watch or in after analysis. You might be tempo run, long interval session, a race, an aerobics easy session, it's always analyzed. The great thing is that this is a personal measurement. We don't need to know your gender, not your age, not your activity level, not your fitness level, not the VO2 max that you have been measuring some stage. You don't need to do a ramp-up test. We know, just based on looking at those correlations, where the intensity is. And this is available for all customers who are using Suunto products. We provided it for free for anybody who has a Suunto watch, even the old Suunto ambits that were manufactured 10 years ago. You just need to have a heart rate belt with that ambit and you get the after analysis. The latest products will get the live information with the Suunto Plus app on the watch itself. So okay, how does it look like when we checked it with some examples, how we have been testing with some athletes and some testers. So I illustrate few example cases how it works. First of all, this is an example of our field testers. So we had a global field test community who is looking our features and testing our content. So they have been testing throughout the summer the ZoneSense values. And in this example, first you can see the ZoneSense green graph, color-coded, and then behind there's a gray heart rate, and there's the black line illustrating running pace. So this guy is now doing 6 times 2 kilometer repeats on track. And at the first part, this is aerobic. So it's a quite easy effort for him. The starting of the workout, he has been now 8 minutes at aerobic zone. Live data shows green, and in after analysis you can see the graph fluctuating. Then the intensity is increased. So this athlete now does the following 2 kilometer repeats with bit faster pace, and you can start to see how the ZoneSense on live data start to go yellow, so goes to illustrate that you are working anaerobically. And the graph after analysis shows as well that this person is doing most of the repeat at yellow range, so yellow color coded representing anaerobic threshold, anaerobic level. And then the last 2 repeats start to be maximum, so the guy is running the last repeat at maximum effort and is completely red. So it basically goes over anaerobic threshold. This is the pace that he is not able to sustain for a longer period of time, and the live data shows the same thing as after analysis. Now, one thing I would also highlight here is that even that you are able to use the ZoneSense for any type of workout or any kind of exercise, there is a physiological response that has also delay. And also the mathematics what we are using here has also delay. So what you can see here is that when, for example, last repetition, the athlete is increasing the pace, 340 per kilometer, the ZoneSense data has a so-called 1 to 2 minute lag. So it means that it starts to gradually increase to that intensity that you are expected to be. So you can see that the first 1 minute it's green, and then the next 30 seconds it's yellow, and then it's increased to the red zone. So there is a lag. So when you know this lag, you can basically look at the values in a way that you can expect the behavior and not to be surprised when you are doing when you are pacing your effort with ZoneSense in the field. Now, this example was also validated with lactate data. So this athlete did also lactate measurement after each repetition, and you can nicely show here that when he has been around aerobic effort, the lactate level is 1.5 millimoles. When the intensity starts to increase, it goes to 2 to 3 millimoles, and then in a VO2 max level, all outs start to be already 4 to 5 millimoles. So quite nicely correlating the intensity. Now, then of course is a question that what about if I want to do a race? How do I use ZoneSense? Well, this is a nice example. This is from the 5K runner, which is one of the leading bloggers regarding wearables and sport industry insights. 5K runner has done a plenty of testing with Suunto products in past, and he was also been testing now the ZoneSense, and he actually published this example on his website just recently, so go ahead and check it out, the insights. But I think this was great example where this athlete in this case did a steady state maximum effort for about 1 hour 15 minutes or so. So it's so long that in practice, if you are pacing it correctly, you are doing it around anaerobic threshold. So it might be a bit up and down around the anaerobic threshold. And when you look at the graph, it's there yellow, red, yellow, red, yellow, red all the time. So the ZoneSense data, when we look at the heart rate variability, it provides a bit of fluctuation. It goes up and down a bit, but the level in this case illustrates really nicely how the athlete was doing anaerobic threshold level effort. And then when you same time look at 2 other graphs, so the black line illustrating the heart rate, it's a good example where the heart rate is very, very difficult to use in pacing. So the first, 15, 20 minutes, the heart rate is 150, and in the last part, it's close to 170, so there's like 20 beat difference on the start and the end. And then when you look at the running pace, it's quite steady, perhaps a bit decline, and at the end of the bit uptrend. So again, illustrating, validating the ZoneSense data levels in a nice way. Now, one thing what I want to highlight here as well, that when you are practicing and using ZoneSense in your own training, the black cross on the start of the session illustrate our warm-up period. So we do not show in ZoneSense the first 10 minutes. The reason for that is that usually when you start the exercise from rest, there is so many changes happening that when we try to understand the heart rate variability data with DDFA, it starts to have too much noise to really have a guaranteed good quality value. So that's why we skip the first 10 minutes and we start to illustrate the data after this 10 minutes time. It's also good to highlight here that when you are exercising and you would want to have a good quality data with the ZoneSense, you don't really need to do a warm-up, etc. if you do aerobic training sessions regularly. So we actually keep in our products, in the watches, in the mobile app, information on where is your aerobic levels with the ZoneSense, and we are able to then know, even on the harder efforts, that where the shift is from aerobic to harder efforts. But if you want to be really clear, of course, it's always advised that please do a warm-up in order to have a proper data always. So that's of course good thing anyway. Now, again, last example, when we talk about different types of exercises, this is a Finnish national speed skating team who has been testing ZoneSense now from the summertime. This is a good example of athletes whose primary sport is actually speed skating, but they do a lot of training in cycling. And once the guys are cycling in mountains in Central Europe, there of course is a bit difficult sometimes to evaluate what is actually the effort that I would need to go. And this is a good example where the guys are riding a 4-hour session, and the guidance is do an aerobic training. Now, Janne Hänninen, who was a head coach, was basically saying quite nice that when just looking at the power data from cycling, the guys were doing too hard session. So and you can see in ZoneSense the first couple hours was aerobic, it was green, everything was going great. But the guys are probably pretty competitive, so the intensity has been increasing, and the athletes have been going to the yellow and red. This is a good example also to highlight that since we are measuring the heart rate variability and the stress levels, there is also cumulative load aspect on ZoneSense. So we know that when we look at the research papers on what is the impact of long workouts with the intensity, the levels will change throughout the workout, and ZoneSense takes into account this cumulative load somewhat. So you can see that it could be also partly you go into the yellow range because the exercise is over 4 hours long, so you go into the harder zones, even that you think that you are doing an aerobic effort. So the intensity, following the intensity with ZoneSense in long sessions is perhaps one of the most interesting aspects of this new technology. This is also a segue of our question. I mean, this is a new technology for Suunto. This new technology for the whole world. So there's a lot of questions that we don't really understand, we don't really know. We have done a test, for example, how the muscle strain will impact the intensity. So for example, when you do a ramp-up test and then you do a strength training session and then you do another ramp-up test, we can see that ZoneSense illustrates the difference, change and takes into account that stress of the muscles. But we don't have too much data to really provide a good guidance on how this kind of muscle strain perhaps should be taken into account. Also, there are aspects, for example, when you do a heat, training in a heat or your nutrition is in a poor condition, you are bonking in the long runs, can you actually see in ZoneSense already this before you bonk, for example. So there is now a need, an interest for athletes, coaches, researchers to take this technology into use, and let's start to share other people how to utilize this technology. For everyday athletes, I think this is the best solution ever, to just to know that, okay, keep the training aerobic or anaerobic. For professional athletes, how different aspects will impact the intensity is probably the most interesting aspect. Again, last note, how to start. Take your Suunto watch, download the Suunto Plus app there to see the live data. Latest watches, Race S Vertical, Suunto 9 Peak Pro, works nicely, coming also to Suunto Ocean. And if you have any Suunto watch with a heart rate belt, yes, you get it on after using Suunto application, so nothing is needed. It's there waiting for your training sessions. Now, we wanted to also provide a bit of greetings from Jack Miller. Jack is our ambassador athlete, ultra runner, and he has been now using ZoneSense. So let's listen what Jack is saying about ZoneSense.
Hey guys, what are my tips for using ZoneSense? Well, I've got a few. First, know that ZoneSense takes some time to learn your body. So when you're just starting out, turn it on, go for some runs, and let it calibrate. That way, you'll get more accurate data. Once you've let it do that little calibration process, make sure that you're using ZoneSense where it really shines. Well, it's not really meant for short, small intervals. What it is meant for is for longer efforts of intensity. So your easy runs, your tempo runs, and your long intervals are the thing it's really built to handle. So use it in those cases and you'll be on the right track. And finally, remember not to let ZoneSense drive you crazy. It's just here to help guide you a bit. So use it in a way that brings value to your running and dials in your training. But don't look to ZoneSense for a stamp of approval of whether or not you're doing well. Use it for maybe going not too hard on your easy days or hard enough on your hard days. But don't let it be, oh, ZoneSense numbers didn't look good, so I'm not happy with my run. No, you should still be having fun out there. Just use ZoneSense to help guide the training and help you dial in as an athlete.
Great, so wise words from Jack. Let's go forward, and now I would like to invite Esa Räsänen from Monicardi. So everybody to know, Esa is leading the Monicardi, which is a university spin-off company from Tampere. But yeah, it's perhaps better that Esa tells who you are and what is Monicardi. So please, Esa, tell the audience what you guys are doing.
Thank you, Jonne, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Esa Räsänen. I'm the CEO of Monicardi and a professor of physics at Tampere University. So Monicardi, indeed, it's a very recent spin-off company from our university. It was founded in April this year, and our background, in fact, is in quantum physics. So yeah, about 10 years ago, we started looking into physiological signals because what we did in quantum mechanics was more like a method development to understand electronic structures. And some of these methods were found to be quite useful when analyzing something super complex in signals, like ECG. And we made some innovations and we raised quite a bit of public funding for research, about 1.5 million euros in total. And then we started looking into beat-to-beat dynamics and also QT intervals. But now what is relevant for ZoneSense indeed is beat-to-beat intervals. So we first started looking into certain diseases, cardiac diseases and overall cardiac risk. And recently we have published quite a lot on this topic together with cardiologists. And we have been quite a lot in the news as well regarding sudden cardiac death and its risk assessment. So this year we published a study assessing sudden cardiac death risk based on a 60-second rest heart rate measurement, and we found that our metrics is actually more reliable than a clinical exercise test. So this was big news, and so there's a lot of potential in this risk assessment and also in disease detection. So we are studying congestive heart failure, long QT syndrome, atrial fibrillation, even outside the episodes of AF, which is quite fascinating. And of course, we have these sport applications as well.
So a lot of work on the medical field in a sense. And now regarding the sports and the DDFA, so you published a year ago an article about the DDFA. So how did you came up with the DDFA? Tell a bit of story. Like, what's the background? Like, where did you end up with this?
Yeah, this actually started more than 5 years ago because many of our group members are very eager endurance athletes. So we started looking at our own data first, what happens when we do exercise.
And Esa, by the way, is a rower himself.
Yeah. And we have some runners, of course, also in the group. And we started looking at marathons, and we found something very interesting in beat-to-beat interval dynamics. And then we published a study in 2020 about beat-to-beat dynamics or beat-to-beat correlations in running. And within that paper and work, we also introduced dynamical detrended fluctuation analysis, or DDFA, which was an extension from DFA, normal conventional detrended fluctuation analysis, which is actually quite old method from early 1990s. And this was a major leap because now we were able to track in real time what actually happens in beat-to-beat dynamics. And then it took some time before we started actually validating this or testing against ramp tests. What happens if we compare DDFA results against lactate thresholds or ventilation thresholds? And we developed a new metric based on DDFA that can be compared or can be validated against lactate measurements. And we found a very nice agreement that we published last year.
Yeah.
And then we started collaborating, and it didn't take long before it was already on the market, which is great, of course.
And everybody to know that when we are now talking about the research papers and the findings, if you want to find them, they are published also in Suunto.com articles, so you can find the background. And of course, in Monicardi website, you guys have also the list of the different articles there. So feel free to dig deeper. Now, when you talk about this understanding of using the DDFA to understand the threshold levels, and so how would you, based on this research, how would you estimate the accuracy and what did you find out?
Yeah, in the first study we had about 20 cyclists, not a huge number, but yeah, meaningful number, and we found that the reliability is within plus minus 5 BPM for the thresholds, both thresholds, which is quite good. Now we are validating or cross-validating these results with much larger data set of 60 runners in ramp tests, and the results are consistent. So I would say it's within plus minus 5 BPM compared to lactate, but we all know that also lactate measurements, they are not always super reliable. So there's some variation depending on who is actually testing it. So, but we are very happy because this is non-invasive, so you can just study the heart rate.
Yeah, I guess for the audience, it's good to understand that when we talk about these threshold levels and how they are estimated, there is very different methods to evaluate where anaerobic threshold, for example, is that we actually made a YouTube video regarding a training intensity, how to evaluate this as well, and highlighting, for example, the ramp up test protocol, different methods. I think there's 15, 16 different methods, and you end up with different results. So ensuring that what is this result compared to those results, both can be a bit different. So what is the actual truth? So when you think about the future of this ZoneSense and DDFA, or in general Monicardi, what do you see that what could we find out more?
Obviously, as you mentioned, we need more data. We need more samples from different sports, not only endurance sports, but also other disciplines. I mean, we know that we are able to track the changes in beat-to-beat correlations within a pretty short time window. About 30 seconds. So we may be able to do also a sport sprint analysis, like football, ice hockey, in these kinds of events. So that's one direction for sure. And then, of course, we need more information about the external conditions like the temperature. And of course, we have to be very precise how we can distinguish the results of ZoneSense from, let's say, your stress levels, if you have fever, if you're catching a flu and so forth. We already have some ideas about this, and we are able to distinguish, let's say, stress from a real like aerobic load or training load. So it looks very promising for the time being.
Yeah. That's definitely interest for everybody, probably on the audience and as well. Let's keep it still clear that current measurement what we have achieved is basically a viable tool for any athlete. But when we talk about perhaps more, how would I say, precise things, that for example training in heat or high altitude, or trying to identify some other aspects which might impact your performance, there is still lot what we can do. Great. Perhaps I think this would be time to then start to discuss a bit on the questions that the people in the audience have had. So there was also quite many questions prior the training session, or prior this webinar asked on the survey. So we try to answer some of those. Perhaps the first question there is that could this replace the training based on heart rate zones? And well, easy answer is yes, of course. I mean, that's the whole point. Like if you are using heart rate zones nowadays, there is some way how you retrieve the heart rate zones. These zones are different between different sports. If you need to go testing, now in practice, you use the heart rate belt, you use Suunto products, you get that are you aerobic, anaerobic, and off you go. So in that principle, of course, it will change or can be replacing the heart rate zones. The good understanding, of course, is that there's nothing new in how the intensity is defined. So basically, if your coach is saying that you need to do an aerobic session, well, we provide aerobic insights. So nothing in that sense is changing. If somebody says that you need to do a threshold run, so please use the ZoneSense to keep your training session green and perhaps see some red as well. So I think that's a good example. Then there's you don't want to say something about that?
Yeah, no, that's fine. But there's an interesting second question coming
I
up.
so what we are looking at is the second question, and I let you to answer this. So the question is that what role does a heart rate variability play when it comes to ZoneSense? So I guess it makes sense to first talk about what is heart rate variability.
And the brief answer is that ZoneSense is HRV, but we have to be careful with this because how HRV is normally heart rate variability, how it's understood. It's normally understood through these basic metrics given by every device out there, which is basically the overall amplitude of your variation, standard deviation, or different variants of that. There are plenty of methods to do HRV, and there are these time-based methods, frequencies-based methods, and nonlinear methods. And what we are dealing with today is actually a nonlinear method, which is an extension from detrended fluctuation analysis. And DFA has been used also a lot, DFA alpha 1, alpha 2, or just one alpha. But this falls easily short because what you miss is the real-time information. So this dynamical DFA goes a significant step further so that we get this beat-to-beat correlation information in real time in all the scales, in all the time scales simultaneously. And this gives so much more information compared to the standard metrics. So as like in this color plots that you showed, it's basically two-dimensional cardiac map of what happens.
Yeah.
So it's like 2 dimensions more than what is given by alpha 1, which is one number.
I think that's I hope everybody understood that now this is a heart rate variable, so that's the so perhaps let's take the next one. So the question is that can ZoneSense replace lab testing completely? Now, yes and no. I mean, in practice, the reason why you go in the laboratory test, there's a different reasons. So for example, it might be that you want to really understand your performance level currently in a steady state environment with a certain conditions, certain protocols, and so on. So for many athletes to really understand, what is the VO2 max value, or where doing a repetition on every 6 months to see how much I have been progressing might make sense that you actually do that laboratory test. And of course, in laboratory, you also have quite a lot of different data sets. So you have lactate, you have ventilation, you have different aspects to really get a good sense of your zone. So in that principle, no, it's not replacing directly the lab test. But if you are an athlete who wants to understand regular basis in different sports where the intensities are, in principle, yes, it can replace the lab test. So basically, if you just want to understand, if I go and run at 6 minutes per kilometer, is this my aerobic or this anaerobic? Well, you don't need to go to laboratory anymore. You can use ZoneSense to actually evaluate.
And many athletes are actually measuring lactate themselves when they do training.
Yes.
So can this replace that part? Yes, sure.
Yes.
This is much easier. You can do it every time in every training.
Yeah. And I would say also that it's good to remember that when we talk about different sports, I give an example. In open water swimming, swimming is one of those difficult sports to understand your real intent. The speed is so much based on the swimming technique. If you are spinning open water where the water can be 17 degrees or 25 degrees. You can swim in a headwind or down. There's so many variables. And really understand, is this session now when you start to swim, is this aerobic effort or anaerobic effort? Now ZoneSense will provide the answers. I have been now testing myself during the summertime ZoneSense in my open water sessions, and it actually works pretty well.
Yeah.
So it's a good example of when you go to the sports that are very difficult to even use the lactate in field. The open water swimming is the best example, and that's so hard to take the blood in middle of the lake. So
Yeah.
it's a good example.
I have tested it a lot in both indoor rowing and outdoor rowing, and it's super helpful to understand what goes on, especially in hard exercises when you do these maximal intervals. So you get much more information, not only your heart rate, which is sometimes irrelevant, but you really see how much you pushed and how you did.
Yeah. So there's a good points on that, and let's try to take the next one. There's a lag in data question. So I think I highlighted this a bit. So there's a question regarding how much lag there is in the data. So on one of those examples, I illustrated that when you do a high repeat, the intensity increase is really fast. It will have a bit of lag on before the ZoneSense graph will increase to the same. So we talk about usually you can see that there's about 1 to 2 minutes lag. Depends of the different training session a bit. So if you do a really short repetition with short rest period. So for example, myself, I have been testing at 30-second intervals with 15-second repetitions. The lag doesn't is not a problem because the cumulative load is there. But when you do a longer rest periods and the lag has a impact there. So, but when you know it, it's usually not a problem. So, but first 1 or 2 minutes you need to wait until the intensity starts to be there where you expect. Nothing else to add there. I mean, there's a physiology point of view and then a bit of the technology point of view. Then let me take the Brad question. I noticed on a bike ride this past weekend that ZoneSense is also tied to cycling speed. I was riding very easy in my aerobic zones, and then when I went down a big hill, I was even pedaling down the hill, but my ZoneSense said that I went up. Okay, so I try to get the answer here. So there is some behavior that might be difficult sometimes to understand. When you have a high intensity exercise, like a high intensity interval, and then you have a rest period, usually the ZoneSense follows the path. But when, for example, we have seen that when you have, let's say, 10 times 5-minute repeats, and then after the 10th repeat, you start to have the cool down period. You can have that the graph, that the value, the ZoneSense value actually is higher than you are expecting. And we have been thinking, what's the reason behind that? So Esa.
Yeah, I noticed it myself that doing a cool down after a very heavy exercise, it could be that the ZoneSense gives very high numbers or shows that I'm not in the basic aerobic zone. I'm above it, and it kind of makes sense when I think how I feel. It feels hard even to do steady state.
Yeah.
It could be that my heart rate is pretty low, but it still feels quite heavy, and I can see it in the metrics that it's
elevated.
Elevated, and it kind of makes sense according to the feeling or physiological feeling I have at that point of time.
Yeah.
So I think this is heading towards that, and I've seen similar stories from fellows.
There was also a question regarding a guys who are doing races or training sessions in hilly environment. So when you do an training session that you are doing uphill and downhill, to understand that in downhills the heart rate can actually go much lower, but ZoneSense is still elevated.
Yeah.
And this seems to be that as his theory here is that when you do a downhill, many times you can't even actually go harder than your cardiovascular system perhaps would be able to do, but the muscles start to be a limiter. And ZoneSense some levels seems to be indicating that when your heart rate is lower, even a steep downhill, your muscles are doing the work. The ZoneSense is higher compared to the flat terrain. So there is this kind of behaviors that the ZoneSense seems to be able to take into account when the heart rate doesn't really take into account. So.
Yeah.
Let's take next one. So how does the ZoneSense take the menstrual cycle into consideration for intensity analysis? I think the simple answer is the menstrual cycle for women and understanding the training intensity, how the ZoneSense impacts. I think the honest answer is that we don't know. So, but now let's remember what we are measuring here. We are measuring the stress levels, the heart rate variability during the exercise.
Yeah.
So the things that can impact this variability, for example, which pace you are in your cycle, it can have an impact. How it impacts, I don't think that we know.
Yeah. And the complication is that it may impact also the heart rate itself. It may impact both your heart rate and heart rate dynamics.
Yeah.
And sometimes it could be that the heart rate is affected more than the dynamics. And this is the case, for example, in high psychological stress that we have found that your heart rate may be much elevated, but the dynamics is not showing that you are doing something anaerobic or so forth.
Yeah.
So, and that is quite relevant because, I mean, when combining information from the dynamics or DDFA, we actually get much more information about the real effect from the exercise.
Yeah. Now, perhaps good to highlight also for the audience that now when we have this this measurement in place and in a sense we are gathering now big data. So in principle, every person who's using the watches, the data start to be gathered. And for example, we have in our offering a possibility to track your menstrual cycle. So in principle, we could have possibility to look at this aspect in long term and see the effect. But just that how much it impacts and what does it mean, that's a different story.
Yeah. Maybe to add that in Monicardi we are doing a lot of basic research on these other factors outside of fitness and wellness. So we are studying sleep, we are studying diseases and risk, and of course this brings more information also in the fitness regime. We understand more about the behavior of the heart.
Yeah. Now there's a question. So in principle, so is this now far better metric for running, for example, an easy jet through run, so means zone 2 run, instead of keeping an eye on your heart rate zone, you use the ZoneSense. Well, yes, this is far better. So again, we need to go back that if you have been in a laboratory today and you go running and you use your heart rate or pace as a intensity metric, probably those are pretty close what you are facing today. But let's say you run outside in rain or uphill or downhill or a technical terrain, or you don't run but you do a cross-country skiing. Well, now this is providing you the information that you are actually wanting to have. So in that sense, much better.
Yeah. Is it okay, Anne, to simplify that in steady state you have a risk to go too strong, too hard, and this is a metric to show that you are pushing too hard, and then on the other hand, in the other end, it may show that you are not pushing enough. Is it that you should maybe try to broaden the
range?
The range. Yeah.
I think that could make a lot of sense. There's a question, do I have to wear the Suunto watch while cycling, or does the Suunto heart rate monitor store the data and I can transfer the watch after the ride? So I think it might refer to the situation that you, for example, use a cycling computer and then you don't want to use the watch at the same time, and then perhaps your heart rate belt. Well, in practice, when you are using Suunto heart rate belts, they have a memory. So, for example, the open water swimming example what I told earlier is based on the fact that the heart rate belt saves the beat-to-beat data in the sensor, and then when you sync that to your watch, it's stored even if that the sensor is not able to live send the data to the watch. So yeah, in principle, if you are riding a bike and you want to look at the cycling computer and not use the Suunto watch while you are riding, in principle that's possible. I personally always wear the Suunto watch also in my bike rides, and the data goes there. But yeah, it heart rate belt measures the data. You just need to have actually the workout started and stopped on the watch in order to get the data stored, synced to the watch itself. So So it's not that simple case.
Maybe I could take the next
Go for it.
question, which
Yes.
is about the empirical evidence suggesting that DDFA might be superior to DFA. Yes, indeed. There is only this one paper that we published for the cyclists, but we have a second study in progress in the journal now with 60 runners, and the results are very consistent. So that's coming up, and there are more studies in the pipeline. And yeah, there's also a mention that DFA has been validated against ventilatory and lactate thresholds in numerous studies. Yeah, this is actually true. There are many nice studies out there. However, the benefit of DDFA is really in the, as told, it's in real-time assessment and also having the full scale dependency at the same time. Because DFA alpha 1 may be very powerful, and it's been proven in many studies, but you get even more information when the scale is not fixed. In alpha 1, it's 4 to 16 typically, but when it's done in a scale-dependent fashion, that we take all the scales into account, we get more information, and then we can find a metric that is even better. So this was very technical, but I wanted to comment on this.
But would you argue that when there is research done with DFA alpha 1, that the findings that have been evaluated with that would be basically with DDFA even better? So, for example, there was a research paper published now, I guess it was in October, where there was research done by how was it so that they were ramp-up test, long session ramp-up test, and they were evaluating that how much the intensities are changing, and there they identified that DFA alpha 1 is better than heart rate or power to understand the intensity levels.
Yes. Yes.
So when you guys look at that type of research, you can base it, okay, same conclusion would be with DDFA, but we would argue that it's just better quality.
We have to check that. I mean, we compared against DFA alpha 1 in the first paper, and we found that we can get better results. But we have to remember that DFA alpha 1 it's often used against ventilation thresholds, not lactate thresholds, which is a different thing, and it may depend what is more important for you. So we obviously need more comparisons, but still there's more flexibility in doing a full-fledged scale-dependent real-time DDFA. Not to dismiss DFA alpha 1.
Yeah. We don't want to dismiss anybody, anything. Let's go then perhaps a more from product-oriented question. So they say, could I sync my intentions to my Suunto watch automatically? And how can I use the measurement of ZoneSense on my watch if I don't train with the heart rate belt? So let's use these good questions. So first of all, when you are using the ZoneSense, we of course show after analysis the data with ZoneSense, and if you have been running, you see the pace data, running power, heart rate data, and we also try to identify. We are mapping the ZoneSense thresholds to the heart rate. So it's a different logic, but the idea is that when we see that the ZoneSense goes from aerobic to anaerobic, what would be the same heart rate in running, for example. And then you can use this information to change the heart rate zones in the watch. So if you want to then use heart rate, the ZoneSense provides you the tools to actually do that. And then in the same way, if you are doing, let's say that you ride your bike with your power meter, you do an aerobic session and you do a perhaps bit higher intensity, you learn where is your aerobic power levels, and then you can put in Suunto watches the cycling power zones accordingly. So I would argue that the best case here is that if you want to use the heart rate, pace, or power zones in a watch, you can learn with ZoneSense where those values usually are. So in a principle, it's like a laboratory on your wrist with ZoneSense, and you can identify the equivalent values with the pace and power and heart rate, and you can put those in the watch. But this doesn't happen automatically, so you need to manually modify those at least right now. This is of course something that we are looking at. How could we do these things more automatic for you guys? But currently it's manual.
Yeah. Then the next question is, what variables influence the result? Is it only HRV or something else? It is indeed HRV only if we think about HRV in a complete way, that it is some assessment of beat-to-beat interactions or correlations. So it's a super complex sequence always, the beat-to-beat interval sequence, even if it's short. If we have 30 beat-to-beat intervals, we can actually put that in 30 factorial ways of different orders. So it may be a very there may be very complex many complex features even in a very short sequence. You can also think of 30 people, a group of 30 people. If we think of all the interactions in the group, it's super complex. And this complexity can be unrevealed when doing a full analysis on the dependencies between the intervals or the correlations. So it's very complex. It's only that is taken into account here.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing to understand, that if you are worried about what kind of setting did I put in the watch and is it used, no, there's no settings. It's just a measurement.
Yeah.
And then again, the different story that you know, if there's some other aspects in your life that impacts the measurement itself.
Yeah.
But the product, the offering, the feature doesn't require anything.
Yeah, of course, we have the baseline there, so we compare against the individual baseline, what happens in the change.
True.
If we could be using also a universal baseline, because we know on the average what happens for a healthy person at rest, but that would generate more error bar.
Yes.
Typically.
I want to open this a bit, what Esa just said, just to everybody to understand what we are talking about regarding baseline. So when you are using ZoneSense in Suunto products, what we try to understand your aerobic effort with that variability, where it relies, and then we really look at, you know, when this is changing, so when it's crossing over to higher intensities. And this baseline of aerobic effort is something that we also keep in memory in different sport groups. So when you start a race in running, we can also rely on the earlier information where the baseline has been based. It will provide a accuracy of, let's say, 10-20% to the data that we have this perhaps bit smarter background analysis there. Now, there was a last quick question asked. Well, that's actually pretty nice that it was asked at this time. So, so where can I find more information on the ZoneSense and probably in general of this? So let's pinpoint a few key places. So first of all, you can go to suunto.com in ZoneSense website. So we have a dedicated site that illustrates all the content that we have been publishing. There's articles, also, you know, the research papers that Monicardi has published. And then we also have, for example, YouTube lecture videos about ZoneSense, and there's a bit of background on other topics. And we are actually creating more of those as well. And then, of course, you can go to Monicardi website and your research papers are on there.
Monicardi.com, or then you can check our research group, Quantum Control and Dynamics at Tampere University. So you will find all the publications and information out there.
And then, of course, you know, you will see us in races and events, and you know, always happy to discuss more about this. So if you see me or Esa anywhere, so come to talk with us. I guess that's pretty much for you guys. Thanks for joining. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys will get fitter, faster, stronger for the next season. So and have nice for your next runs. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.